exciting to have an afternoon kickoff, Joe? Doesn't happen very often.
No, funnily enough, the Six Nations is full of afternoon kickoffs, so for me it's something I'm pretty familiar with, but for the players I think they'll really enjoy it. For the crowd that gets in, I think it really opens the game up to families and an afternoon kickoff. Hopefully, it just allows the game to be played in slightly drier conditions and allows the tempo of the game to be just a little bit quicker.
So you've been as a sort of an outsider looking in terms of the Irish camp with New Zealander, being a New Zealander and now Australia. What does this Bledisloe rivalry mean to you? Was it sort of mythified within club rugby?
Yeah, I grew up as a young kid watching Australia versus New Zealand. Bledisloe, it goes back a long way. I've watched disappointment John Eales kick goals to win Bledisloe Cups and to be even Berkey might have kicked a couple of goals as well. And I just don't remember those ones. No, as selective as it was, to be on the other side of it, I've been involved in a few coaching recently where the result was quite tight and a couple of results that were very large. And for me, it's less about the Bledisloe Cup at the moment because I'm very keen to take one test match at a time. So we're just looking to get selection right as best we can, get into Wales, get those two tests out of the way and the Georgian test out of the way, and then we'll be better prepared to know what trajectory we're on and what we need to do to be as competitive as we can be at the back end of the Rugby Championship when the Bledisloe occurs.
But while we're on the Bledisloe, obviously Australian teams are sort of almost squaring the ledger in the Super Rugby this year, which is sort of unusual the last sort of couple of decades. Would you have any misgivings as to be that sort of Kiwi coach to take the Bledisloe out of New Zealand?
Look, I think there's a lot of rivalry there, but there is the Anzac spirit, that genuine. It's not probably until you live overseas for a while that you actually realise just how often Australians and Kiwis they team up. First time I went to London, we ended up with a touch game in the middle of London with the Aussies versus the Kiwis. But the touch game was just an excuse to socialise afterwards, really. And so, those bonds are pretty strong, and they've been forged over the last century plus. So, it's an awkward one for me. No different. Well, probably a little bit different, but similar to the first time I got involved with the All Blacks. It was against the Irish, and I'd spent 10 years coaching in Ireland. 6.5 years coaching the Irish team, and some of those guys who I'd coached for 10 years were in the opposition and were good friends after spending so much time with them. So I guess one of my real motivations for trying to help was when Peter Horn rang me. I do genuinely believe that we need to be as strong as we can in this corner of the world, and that's a corner we share with the All Blacks and New Zealand. Not a corner where we can live in isolation, I don't think. So one of the ways to help each other is to try to be as competitive as we can be against each other to drive the performance of both teams. And there's certainly been a lag on our side of the Tasman, and we're going to try to roll our sleeves up and close the lag as much as we can.
Joe, when you took the Wallabies job, no doubt you probably had that game in the future, and there would be willing to upload everything you know about New Zealand rugby into the Wallabies squad that you've got. Was that a consideration that you had to cross that kind of Rubicon? If you
and that is a conundrum that you face whenever you shift, and with the amount of transitions that occur in international rugby, but even in club rugby, you often end up, a foe to your friends somewhere along the line. And I don't think I have a massive amount of IP, but I've got a lot of experiences after 20 plus years of professional coaching, and whatever the All Blacks, whatever I know about the All Blacks know lots about me as well. And so, I think even the All Black coaching staff, some of them are good friends. Leon McDonald, Jason Holland. Jace was in Ireland when I was there with Munster. I worked with Leon, obviously, with the Blues. Worked with Jason Ryan with the All Blacks. So a lot of those guys they know me inside out as much as I know some of what the All Blacks have been doing. But with a new head coach and a new coaching staff, there's obviously going to be shifts in what they do, and we're going to have to watch what they do through the England series and through the early games in the TRC to find out how best to try to combat whatever we think they're going to bring.
Have you been encouraged by the Super Rugby, what you've seen in Super Rugby, specifically the Trans-Tasman contests, where, as alluded to, it's been more competitive than it has in a couple of years?
Yeah, and it's probably fluctuated a little bit like the Bledisloes have in the last 2 years as well, where being competitive 1 week hasn't necessarily materialised into being competitive the next week. And I think driving that consistency of performance is massively important. What happened to the Brumbies in Auckland and what the Brumbies then did last weekend is a fantastic example of the fluctuation in performance that occurs, and trying to build a consistency in that performance is going to be part of the challenge. I was at the Blues Reds game in the weekend. Fantastic game for a neutral supporter, I think, because the excitement there was fantastic, and the way the lead changed hands and the game ebbed and flowed. But just being able to nail those big moments at the finish of those games as well, which has been a bit of a challenge for the Wallabies in recent years. And I don't necessarily have the answer, but I've had some experiences where teams haven't quite nailed those big moments, and trying to build a mindset where you can stay process driven through those periods.
Joe, what do you put the consistency down to then?
I don't have, as I said, solutions or answers to that. I just have to try to best create a consistency, and I think the best way to do that is, first of all, to get selection right, and we're working really hard on that. And that's not just me, Laurie's busy with the under-20s at the moment, and I'm looking forward to them getting out tomorrow and doing a good job. Mike Cron is looking very closely at particularly the pack and the tight forwards. Jeff is coaching against teams, and he's got the Rebels there, so he's looking closely. And Owen Toolan's got a great eye for detail around performance. So that's what we're working on right now. And then once we get to know the people we have, I think we'll try to build the mindset where we can be consistent. And I know that's what Super Rugby coaches, and I've been really enjoying the interactions I've had with Super Rugby coaches.
Are you the sort of coach that maybe take 10 for example, you have someone that's an 8 1 week and 3 the next, or someone that's maybe a 6 or 7 most weeks? What would you prefer in a 10? Or if a selection at whole, that real consistency, or maybe not reach those super heights, but be able to guide the side around?
Yeah, I think those players would love to be a 7 or 8 out of 10 every week. So my job is to try to facilitate that and help them be that. For them, how do you decipher if you're a 3 1 week and a 7 the next? If you have that capability, why can't you replicate that from week to week? Build on the skill set you need, and also the mindset that dovetails with that to be consistent. And some of that may be combinations as well. I know when you make a lot of changes, that can be one of the variables that upsets individual performance. I think a good example of that is last year in Dunedin with 12 changes. We kind of destabilised the performance level of the New Zealand team at that time, and it showed the margins are very fine. You don't have to be too far off, and I think that's part of what I explained about, I guess, those back-to-back efforts or performances of the Brumbies. You don't have to be too far off to suddenly not be on the right side of the ledger at the end of the game.
So we've already lost one quality outside back from the World Cup squad last year to rugby league. Are you concerned at all about these reports that Carter Gordon's considering a switch of codes?
Look, I had a chat with Carter much earlier in the season, and one of the things, Carter is competing for a Wallaby spot, just like a number of the other 10s. I think there are a number of 10s. Tom Liner did really well last week, I thought. Ben Donaldson's been going well. And Noah Lolosio is the most consistent of the kickers, certainly at goal. So, one of the things about having players who may or may not leave, and while it's written about often, it's a lot more often may not leave than actually end up leaving. So, I'd love Carter to stay and to be in the mix for the Wallabies. But if he doesn't, then I guess I'm excited about working with the next guy or whoever we do select in that position.
The uncertainty of the Rebels can't be helping though, can it? I mean, they need a decision sooner rather than later, or they could lose any number of players. Yeah,
look, I'm probably as frustrated about that as anyone, and a lot of that is a process that we don't entirely control, or Rugby Australia don't entirely control, and nor do the Rebels. They've obviously had some people working away with the administration of it, and what's the next best step. And I think there are meetings later this week that will hopefully provide further clarity. But for me, I can only control what I can control, and that is trying to observe and build relationships with some of those players, because depending on what happens, I just want them to stay in Australia, be available, and be keen to put the gold jersey on.
Just one last one for me. Tim Ryan was electric on the weekend. See any sort of comparisons with the little fella and Mac Hansen, and see the sort of winger you like to see?
Yeah, I think Mac's hair's a bit longer, and I've seen Mac do some fantastic stuff, and I've met Mac a few times. I've said hi to Tim. That's about it. But I guess that's one of the things when we often talk about, we'll be devastated if this guy goes or that guy goes. We'll be disappointed. We definitely want people to stay here and be part of the Wallaby setup. But I love it when someone is unavailable and suddenly we uncover a kid who didn't just score those tries, he finished them superbly, and particularly the third one, his footwork. He showed some promise in the 20s last year, and as I mentioned, we've got Laurie in the 20s with Nathan Gray at the moment, and some of those guys will be part of the future for us, and even meeting young guys at the Reds like Massimo DeLutis and Mike Cron. We have a 5-minute meeting before Mike Cron has got him down into a scrum position, and I just don't know what those guys do, but it looks pretty exciting, the way they can push against each other. But I would say that that's something that excites me. The kids like Tim Ryan who come through. I watched Massimo DeLutis last year, and if we do lose people, we're disappointed. We don't want that to happen, but if we do, my mindset is right. Well, let's get this guy and let's build a combination and go forward.
Just following on from that, you had a squad in mind when you took over, or at least a group of players you've been looking for. Have you been impressed with the way those younger guys have really stepped up and accelerated their growth at Super Rugby? Guys like Darby Lancaster, as well as sort of Tim Ryan and others, have taken some steps. Yeah,
and I think one of the things about the steps they take is they're never always forward. People think that high performance is the gradient is steady. It's never steady. It's always undulating. And I think sometimes if you don't get what you want in front of you and you're playing on the edge or you're playing at 10, and that becomes a very tough day at the office because it is very hard to play when you're not on the front foot, but you find a way. And there are some of those young guys who have been really impressive. And I suppose we started with a list of that were about 3 deep in every position, and that list has been jumbled around and names have appeared on the bottom of it, and the list is growing. Now that is confusing a little bit for me and makes more work because I'm trying to track different players, but it's exciting for all the coaches because as we start to get into our conversations around selection, it's nice to have those fresh names and be excited about the freshness they'll bring. At the same time, I think having experience at the top level, it doesn't mean that you're going to be better athletically, but your decision making, your ability to stay in the game, and you've seen this scenarios before, so you feel a little bit more calm about what's happening. That's invaluable as well. So somehow getting the balance is really important.
Joe, you know what your best 15 is?
Early December. I think one of the things that you learn most around players and selection is when you've had time with them, and particularly I'm looking forward to the end of the year and the spring tour, because one of the things when you get them away on tour, you have a little bit more time with them, and that'll, probably facetious to say early December, but that's when we'll get a bit more growth, I think, from the team. Through these early games, we'll know our best available 15, I think, when we name our 15 to play Wales. We're taking it one step at a time. We've got to be really competitive, and so we want to be as good as we can be from the first kick-off, really. So we'll know that in that Wales week, in that first week of July, and we'll be probably as interested as you guys to see what it looks like. But we'll be excited about it, regardless of who that is, because for me, I'm just a rugby coach. I just want to get started, I'm watching these teams train, like yesterday at the Waratahs, and they trained really well in a bit of a swimming pool, actually, because it really poured with rain. But I saw what I think is really good coaching, and I saw players really committing to the task that they were trying to put together, and that's what I like doing. So I'm a little bit of a frustrated coach at the moment because I see other people coaching, and I can't wait to get started with the group of young and maybe a couple of middle-aged men that we select.
Joe, something that probably you haven't had to factor in is the prospect of selecting overseas-based players. Are you planning to do that for the first Wales tests? And if so, how many?
To be frank, it probably isn't something we've planned. We've always been consistent in the messaging around prioritising the players who are playing locally, and the reasons for that. As you said earlier, it looks like we're a little bit more competitive in Super Rugby this year. We want to be more and more competitive in Super Rugby, and you don't do that if your best players don't stay and commit and play within the Super Rugby teams that are based here. So we want people who come to the Super Rugby games to see the best players that we've got, not to watch them in European games or in the top league from a distance. So if that's going to be a priority for us, then we do definitely want to select from what is currently available in Australia. At the same time, there are guys that may potentially return to Australia, or there are maybe gaps that we feel in the shorter term. We just need to make sure that we've got the ballast or the ability to run a game as best we can to be as competitive as we can be. So I wouldn't rule it out completely, but it's not our priority.
Just the choice between, oftentimes it's a young guy or an incumbent sort of thing, an experienced incumbent. It's a weird situation that a lot of the incumbents are the young guys after Eddie's squad at the World Cup. Do you look even further back to kind of players who weren't considered for the World Cup and sort of bring them forward in your mind?
Yeah, it depends on availability at the time. If everyone's available here, then you wouldn't have to go too far anywhere else. I don't think we've got to build. We want to be as competitive as we can be when the Lions arrive. That's my massive target. That's the pinnacle event. That's next up. How do we do that? Well, I think we make sure that we can get as much time with the players, and the players have that time in combinations that they play in the Super Rugby clubs, so that we can build the cohesion that we're going to need. And I think it's one of the things that, when you look at the All Blacks when they're very good, a number of combinations are coming out of Super Rugby or combinations that get built over a number of years in the All Blacks that make that happen. It's the same with Ireland at the moment. A lot of those combinations, the whole front row, just about the reserve front row, they all come from the same club, and therefore they know each other and they combine well, and that cohesion is really important. So at this point, would never say never, but our priority is the home-based players.
Are you more likely to pick from overseas for the TRC as opposed to those July tests, given the really quick build-up to it?
I can't answer the question really, because I'm genuinely not sure. I don't have an intention, and again, we've had one full coaches meeting, so I say I, but it's very much we, because the other selection team and in our discussion with those first three tests, it is very short, and it makes sense to go local. Beyond that, for us, it still makes sense to go local if our end point is going to be the British and Irish Lions tour. And players can't learn, they can't get experience or learn from experiences if they don't get to have the experience. And so we want to put them in those situations and try to help them learn from them. Having said that, having an experienced head in amongst the younger group, it does help, without a doubt. Some of the best coaching I've ever seen is player to player. It's me just trying to provide an environment where that player to player interaction can facilitate the improvement and building of confidence of younger players or less experienced players.